First, I'd like to talk about the ethical commitments between feminism and Christianity. And commitment-wise, I think that the biggest thing that Christianity teaches us is equality, and that doesn't mean that we have to be this exact same as or share certain traits with other people. It just means that we treat them equally no matter what. And I think that that comes into ethics quite a bit, especially with feminist ethics, which tends to just mean women wanting to have the equal rights that they have been denied for thousands of years throughout history. And I think that Christianity would kind of encourage that, because in Christianity, we're not encouraged to see other people as beneath us or intentionally leave them or put them there. So bringing everyone onto somewhat of an equal scale, I think is, I wouldn't say required, but almost required by Christianity. And so with compatibility, I think this kind of goes back to what Kohlberg talked about, and he mentioned a sort of 6-step process, like a progression that young children go through in order to become ethically sound. And the issue with what he said is that he decided that only when you reach step 6 can you be really ethically or morally correct. And in doing so, he kind of isolated the female gender to, oh, well, they're stuck on step 3, they're not able to get past the relationship portion. And how he should really view this instead is they took their step 3 and used it to grow through steps 4, 5, and 6 if he wants to use his own scale still. But he's kind of basing this off of how males progress and trying to bind females into the same kind of role. And I just don't believe that that type of thought process is supported by Christian ethics. And finally, kind of what I was talking about earlier, like the love command that Jesus gives us is treat neighbors equally, and like I said, kind of bring everyone on a level playing field. Number 2, the short story I wanted to talk about was Truth of Fact, Truth of Feeling by Ted Chiang. And I thought the story was really interesting because the idea of being able to look back and remember all of the things you've gone through, that's something I try to do a lot. I'm a very nostalgic person. But it made me wonder, like, what kind of value does our memory possess? And I talked about this a little bit in my discussion post, but I think that in the issues between the tribe and the, I think it was the British that were had written documents. The tribe basically talked about the importance of trusting the humans over the technology. And I'd been thinking about that a little bit, and I thought there's some sort of, in my opinion, inherent value in human memory, even if it's incorrect. Not incorrect necessarily, but debatable. I don't believe we should put our faith in something that is without a soul or a conscience instead of humans, because I think the autonomy of the people who have those memories is more important than being correct, I guess, which is a little weird to say out loud. Another thing that was really interesting was malleable memory is what I was calling it. And we see this with the father who thought his daughter had yelled at him and then worked really hard to change and become a great father. And in reality, he was the one who said that terrible thing to his daughter where he said, it was your fault that my wife left because he didn't ever want to have a child. And it makes me think, do I do that kind of thing? And I thought, well, surely not. I've probably been right in most of the scenarios where I was upset. And of course, that's unreasonable to think, but that kind of thought-provoking piece is, I don't know, it's very insightful in my opinion. And I was thinking, is it better to remember, in that sense, use Remem to have all of these memories and go back and think, okay, well, what was I doing on April 27th, 2019? Okay, well, I was probably celebrating my friend's birthday, and that's a cool thing to go back and remember. But that also gives you the ability to go back and just re-experience hurt and bring up old things that I think it would be better if you moved on from. They kind of talked about between the father and daughter fighting. I think between me and my sister, the ability to have all those old fights be brought back up, sometimes I think it's just better to acknowledge that moving on is the right scenario, even if you don't choose to talk about it. Number 3, my favorite parts of this course, the readings were incredibly consistent in the fact that we just had to read almost every class, be prepared, and I felt like we were constantly getting fed new info. And this thing in class review was so important to me because every time we would get into class, we would talk about everything we just read, which combined like the memory of reading it with understanding and your Chris's ability to like explain, because I think we had a lot of like really weird questions that somehow you still answered. I think, never mind, actually, I'm sorry. And then another thing that was one of my favorites in this class was understanding worldviews, and this is kind of why I started getting more interested in philosophy, was because I like the idea of being able to understand how people see the world, why people do what they do, and just the way people live their lives differently, I think is so fascinating. And philosophy is like a very broad, good way to do that, because I'm able to see, okay, these people, even though they might not say, I'm a Kantian, they would still think, oh, well, you should always do this in this scenario. This is the right thing to do. Or utilitarians, like I can see how people think and understand the reasoning behind it when they explain their answers to questions or make one decision instead of the other. And I think that was my favorite part of this class. And then finally, number 4, the difficulties in the class kind of went hand in hand with the readings. I found that sometimes I had trouble reading all the way because I would wait too long to do it. And then I would only get like half the reading done the morning of. This is a me thing. This is just, I should have been more diligent about it. And you gave good advice about like, you have to be in a certain mindset to read philosophy, and well, I didn't do that all the time, but that's something to fix in the future. And these last 2, I think, go together a little bit. And what I mean by which is the correct answer is, it's kind of hard for me to feel like there was one like, oh, I like this philosophy and I think this is the way that I want to live my life, because it feels like every philosophy had a bit of like a gotcha or a catch, and that was confusing. And I thought, well, blending them seems like it makes sense and it fixes some problems, but it also messes with others. And like personally, I like the idea of I think I said deontology and Christian agape ethics. I think that's what I wrote my first paper about. I think those are the best blends of ethical theories. But how do I do my best? That was the big question that I was thinking in my head. I was like, I'm not sure how I can be the best person in this world, give money to people who need it, help grandmas crossing the street for good reasons and not for bad reasons. And I don't know. I don't know that I would say I have an answer to that, but that's probably my biggest difficulty. So thank you for everything you've done this semester, and look forward to seeing you next spring.